For the following exercises, match the given linear equation with its graph in this particular figure 24. So we got a whole bunch of lines, A all the way through F it looks like. And what we got to do is we got to take these 6 equations and try to match them up to which one of the 6 letters does that particular equation correlate with. So the first thing is notice that they're all linear. Okay, let's back up. They're all linear. What's the general equation of a linear line? It's all y is equal to mx plus b. What are the 2 defining features of a linear equation? There's only 2. It's the slope and the y-intercept. That's what you need to focus on. The slope and the y-intercept. Okay? So, why don't we do this? Let's go through each of the 6 and identify the slope and the y-intercept. So let's take a look at the first one. The slope here. What's the slope? You might say, well, this looks close, this looks familiar, but where's the number in front of the x? I don't see it. Well, remember, if there should be a number there, and you don't see it, and you know that this particular value then, the slope, is then multiplied by the x, that means there's a hidden value here being multiplied by x. That doesn't really change this particular value, right? It has to still equal negative x. So what would that be? Well, it doesn't have to equal negative x, but I mean it has to equal x actually, because the negative sign here will be part of the slope. It's really not part of the x, okay? So it's simply going to be -1. Right, if I were to rewrite this and say -1x, isn't that the same as just saying negative x? So that's how I know the slope is -1, okay? Now, what's then the y-intercept? So the y-intercept b is then going to be this piece. Now notice here you have to take the sign into account. Okay, so that's going to be -1 as well. So these are the 2 defining features of the first line. Let's move on to the second one. Okay, so the second one, what's the slope? You might say, oh, that's easy, -2, and that is correct, it is easy, right? And b, what's b? Oh, -1, piece of cake. Let's move on to the third one. So what's the slope here? Well, this one turns out to be -1/2. Okay, nobody likes fractions, but it's fine. And the y-intercept turns out to be -1. All right, not bad. Let's move on to the next one. F of x is equal to 2. So this one doesn't look like it follows this form very well. You're right, it doesn't follow it very well, but it still does, right? Is there an x here? No, there's no x, right, on the right-hand side. So if I have to get rid of x, like if I have to make x disappear, like David Blaine would, what does m have to be? It has to be 0, right? Because what's 0 times x? 0, right? It kind of makes it just poof, disappear. So I know now that the slope here of this particular equation is going to be 0. And what's then the y-intercept? Well, the y-intercept is actually going to be this particular 2. Here, watch. If I were to rewrite this equation and make it look like this, y is equal to 0x plus 2. Notice how this looks strikingly similar to this now, right? We can define the 0 as the slope and the y-intercept then as a +2. If you then had to simplify this, what would you have done? You would have said, oh, that just cancels, so y is equal to 2. Oh, right. See? That's how easy it is. All right, let's just get rid of that. Let's box that. And now next, what's the next one? So again, what's the slope here? They're trying to mess with you a little bit, right? They're rewriting it. Okay, so we want to try to take this and reorganize it for ourselves. Let's put the x first, plus then 2. Oh, right, okay. So what's the slope then? Well, if I put a 1 in there, right, that's the same thing as saying just x, so I know then the slope is 1. And then what's the y-intercept? Well, the y-intercept will be that 2. Okay, so we know that. And last but not least, let's take a look at the last one. So the slope here, this one's easy, right? 3. The y-intercept is going to be, I don't know where y came from. It's going to be 2. Okay? Now, let's just clean this up a little bit. All right. So now, all of these lines, notice they have different slopes and combinations of slopes and y-intercepts. So the easiest thing, I think, to begin with is the y-intercept. Okay, because the y-intercept is where these equations, or where these lines intersect the y-axis. Remember, the y-axis is always the vertical one. So, So now, let's work with this one. It says that the y-intercept here is going to be -1. So where's -1? Oh, it's right here. Okay, well what this tells me is that there are 3 lines, okay? There are 3 lines here that have a y-intercept of -1. All right, so we know that this can be either D, E, or F. All right, let's just move on. What about this one? Oh, that also has a -1. Okay, so that's one of those 3. And what about this one? Oh, wait, that also has a y-intercept of -1. So I know that these 3, I have to distribute basically D, E, and F amongst them. Okay? So let's move on to then the next one where it says B, the y-intercept of this equation is a +2. All right, so notice here's the +2, right? Okay, so that could be A, B, or C. How about this one? That's also +2, and the next one is also +2. So I know now between these 3, I have to distribute basically A, B, and C. Now what defines or differentiates now these groups of 3 are going to be now the slope, right? The slope here is -1, the slope here is -2, the slope here is -1/2. So let's take a look at D, E, and F. Which slope would you say is the steepest? If I asked you which slope here, the orange, the blue, or the red, which slope is the steepest? The steepest would have been F, right? So which slope here is the steepest? In other words, is the largest, right? Well, it turns out to be this one, right? It had the -2. Now you might say, well, wait a minute. -2, isn't that smaller? It's more negative than -1 and a -1/2. Remember, the negative sign is telling us the direction of the slope. The negative sign means starts at the top left and works its way down to the bottom right. Okay? So you're really looking at the magnitude of the value, the number, to tell the steepness. The sign then tells you the direction. Okay? Kind of like vectors in physics when you get to that. So this particular equation here, and I should write over here, this one is F. Okay? Now which one of these 3 was the least steep? Well, that would have been D, right? Oh, great. So that means now D is going to be the one with the least steep slope, right? Or the most flat slope. And we can say that now that is D. And then the one in the middle turns out to be the one at the top, right? That turns out to be letter E. Okay. Now we're going to apply literally the same logic to the next half. So here, which one of these 3 slopes, A, B, or C, is the steepest? Well, A, right? So which one of these 3 slopes here, the M's, is the steepest? Well, it turns out to be this one, had a slope of 3, right? So I know that that's A. Easy enough. Now how about, oh, I realize I put that not necessarily in the wrong spot, but I want to keep it consistent. So now which one of these 3 had the, shallowest slope? I don't know, steep, shallow. Which one had the flattest? There it is. Which one of these has the flattest slope? Or the smallest slope? Well, it looks like C, right? So which one of these is the flattest or has the least amount of slope to it? Well, it turns out to be the black one, right? That has a slope of 0. And remember, 0 slopes are totally horizontal. C. What's left? Well, the one in the middle, right? The one in the middle is left. And that turned out to be B. And that's all there is to it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so very much for tuning in. I really do appreciate your time. And I do hope this video helped you out. If you can, hit that subscribe and like button. It would mean the world to us. And we look forward to helping you with more problems. All right? I hope you do truly have a great day.